Hey guys, today I am going to go over the process I used to paint this dog that I'm popping up here on the screen. Anyway, it's going to be about a 15-minute video, so you guys can speed it up if you want to, but I'm talking through the entire thing, trying to explain a little bit about what I'm doing. Anyway guys, I'll see you at the end of the video. Now, I've already laid some of the foreground and the background in there because I'm going to be putting hairs over the top, and it's much easier to put the hairs over the top of the background than try to paint around individual hairs. So I'm coming in here with a light gray, and then I am working with a paint pen to pull out smaller strands of hair, and I have tried a new brand of paint pens and I'm absolutely loving these. I've been using Poscas for a very long time. So now I'm going to move into the nose. So there's one little section that has some pink in there. So, you know, we put that little pink in there. Now I'm going to work with Payne's Gray. So, and this is straight out of the bottle. Matter of fact, I did not mix hardly any colors whatsoever for this painting. As you notice, I'm working with a texture stencil a little bit. I always like to put some texture in as I'm building. As if you've watched me in the past, you know I like to do that. And so we're still working with the Payne's Gray right now. And even though that looks really, really dark against that stark white, it's not as dark as you think it may be. So I'm going to start blending in and shading in. Then I'm going to use my little paint pen just a little bit to help me out. And then I'm going to come back in with white. We're going to do some of the texturing with white. I'm also going to lay some white over all of the nose, and it's going to create that blue shift. It's going to get that gray cast, right? So that just helps me create a dimension of depth. And even though it looks like I killed those textures in the background, it did not. All those will build upon each other. Once I get done adding that gray cast in there, as you can see that now we're closed up on it, then I'm going to come in and put all those squiggly little lines in there, and I will do that freehand. I just prefer to work that way. It works out much better for me. You could always add those textures in, but you're really trying to go lines around the gray spots. So adding all that texture in there and building it up, it will get a very, very cool, realistic look. And now I'm going to work on the eyes next. And I know I've done paintings in the past where I don't start with the eyes, and I know it drives some people buggy because they always want to start with the eyes because the eyes are very important. But whenever I do start on the eyes, I like to put my outline in around it. So I've made up a little bit of a brown tone. That's a sepia, actually. So I'm going to come in and we're going to put a little bit of color around the outside of the edges where it's going to be because it's much easier. Now I've come back in with the Payne's Gray, and I'm going to start to put the pupils in. If you look over on the right-hand side, that little cross section I put in there, that is a window frame, and that'll show up very, very well when I put the highlights in a little bit. So now we have mixed up. The only two colors that are going in the right-hand side of this are burnt sienna and sepia. That's the only two colors I got besides the Payne's Gray that's already in there for the pupil. And we'll put a little bit of texture as we go in there, and then we will reinforce it with the sepia for my darks. And then notice how dark gray the white, quote unquote, of the eye is. And you'll see what we do with that. And of course, I'm using my little paint pen again. Now we're going to pull out those highlights, and we're going to pull out those highlights. That's actually not the whites of the eye. That's a third eyelid. For dogs, they have, you know, more than one eyelid. So we're going to do much the same on the other side, only we're using a cyan. And then we're going to use cyan, and we're going to use a darkish blue-gray. So what I did was use Payne's Gray and add a little bit of white to it to make that darker gray. And just come in here, darken, putting those little tones in there. And then we use some white right there, and we're going to glaze some white over at a couple of spots. And then we're going to come back in, reinforce the grays. Once we do that, we'll come back in. We'll put our highlights in. And you see my fingers in there. That's where I'm tapping, because if you're putting that paint pen down, it can sometimes be a little bit too harsh. You can tap and rub that out just a little bit. So now I've come in, and we are working on our tones. We're going to be working on the base color tones. We're going to do a couple of layers here with those colors. I've got a lot of black to go in here. The black is going to come, or it's not even black, but the black is going to come over the top of those colors. So we want to put those colors in first, because I always am looking at how I'm going to be working the picture. It's much easier to take strands of hair over something than it is to try to paint around strands of hair. So as you can see, I'm using some Blackbeard wheat to enhance some of those dagger strokes we're throwing in here. And then here, I'm just using the edge of that paintbrush to create a nice rough textured freehand shield. So when you're working like that, you can, you just work in the general direction in which the hair flows. And I can promise you, doing this in more than one layer instead of doing it in just one color is going to be much more, it's going to create much more depth and vibrancy to your picture in the end. Even though we're going to cover up a lot of that, it will still show through. Once I get my brown tones in there roughly the way I want them, I'm coming back in and I'm going to work with the Payne's gray. Just straight up Payne's gray is all I'm going to use on this hair back here for now. And we're going to start filling them, but you notice I'm going to come in here and kind of work slow. And when I say slow, I don't mean like I'm taking hours and hours. I can tell you that it was about 3.5 hours of painting time start to finish on this entire painting. So when I say slow, I just mean you don't want to try to hit that all in one shot. You want to build it up. Notice the entire time I'm working, pulling like strokes in the directional flow that the hair is. And we're leaving spots out where there's going to be highlights just a little bit, even though we can highlight them later. But as you see on the left-hand side, see how I needed to bring that dark hair over that hair that's in the background? That's would be very, very difficult to try to lay those grays back on top of this darker color later. That's why we make those choices. It's more automatic for me to work that way now, but it's something you should plan out and think about when you're working. Like, how is it going to be easier to create an effect later in the picture and plan the direction in which you want to flow this picture. Now, I like to not just work one little section of my picture. I like to, bounce around my picture a lot and work the entire picture. It doesn't mean you have to. It's just the way I much prefer working. And that depends on what my ultimate goal is. My ultimate goal here is not complete and total realism. I have this vibrant kind of almost realistic look that I am known for with my customers, and that's pretty much what they expect when I make a painting for them. And this is pretty representative of the paintings that I do for customers on a regular basis. So I'm not going to say that I don't put detail in there, because there actually is, a pretty significant amount of detail in there, but it's not exacting detail necessarily. There are key places in the picture in which the details have to be absolutely correct. Like, for instance, the eyes have to be absolutely correct in relationship to the proportions of the face, and the nose, if you're working a pet portrait like this, that those are key features. But when you start dealing with the structural portion of hair and fur and hair are moving objects. So if your hair is not in exact same place as it was yesterday, nobody's going to notice that, because it's always moving. And that doesn't mean you can just get away with putting it wherever you want. I mean, you have those major features that have to be in the right places, where those brown sections. So now I'm working in, as you can see, I'm working in with my paint marker again, and I will leave you guys a link for those. I used poscas for a very, very long time, and I needed to get something for one of my grandchildren that was fairly inexpensive, and I tried these out, and they are absolutely, I can't really tell the difference between them and poscas, and they're about a third of the price. And so the way I'm working that, you'll see I'll put these hairs in, and then I'll come back with my Payne's gray over the top and knock them back. And you can continue to build that just as if you were scratching and erasing. You can use the exact same effects as if you were scratching back to white. And you can do that with any color. So I use a great deal of the white paint markers, not a great deal of the colored ones, unless I'm doing, more cartoony style of art. It's also important to note, as you look, if I'm working away from the picture, like in the back section, there's some fur in the back. Notice I don't put a lot of detail in that. You don't want to. You want to back up with your airbrush a little bit and spray it from a distance. You want it to not be near as crisp, and that'll give it that out of focus background, similar to what a photography will capture. So normally, if you're focused tight and you're with a photograph, you know, in today's day and age, a lot of times they have the bokeh effect, kind of where everything in the background is just a little bit blurred out and everything in the foreground is really tight. And that's in portrait photography pretty often. And that has to do with the focal length that they use in their camera, but that's too much detail to go into today. Okay, so now you're going to see me use more of the paint marker, and you're going to see how I break into that with the, you know, putting the color over the top of it, the black, or in this case, Payne's gray. You'll also see, you know, me come back and I'm going to soften those edges just a little bit. So in other words, I'll put those sharp lines in, but then I'll come back in with the white paint with my airbrush and blow it in there. And why am I doing this instead of, you know, airbrushing those in? Well, it can be very difficult to get a very crisp white line. Even if you're very experienced painting, yes, it can be done. I have done it, but it's not a really quick and easy process. You really got to take that pressure down and go really, really slow. I like to work a little bit faster than that. And, you know, it's not to say I won't work slower when I need to. I'll absolutely work slower if that's what I need to get the job done in the proper way and make it look good. But I don't think anybody's going to complain too much. Matter of fact, my customer was extraordinarily happy with this painting. I may see, hopefully I can leave you guys a reaction video of my customer receiving this painting.
What do you want me to do now?
Keep them closed.
Okay. I just got nervous. What is it?
All right. 3, 2, 1.
I get it right. Is this what you went to go pick up? Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. So look at you. I know. Look how pretty you are. I love
First
it.
original art piece.
I love it. Do you love it? It looks so
I
good.
love it.
One of the coolest things about doing these is, you know, getting reaction videos and pictures from my customers. It really makes my day. Anyway, so you can see me going in here with the white. And, you know, as I was talking about, so we're taking out some of that harshness. That's going to create a little bit of blue shift. Anytime you spray white over the top of a dark color like that, you're going to get a little bit of that blue shift. So we're going to come back in later and we're going to add just a little tiny hints of orange. You won't even really be able to see me spray. It'll be so light. And we're going to put just a little bit of orange over those spots where we need to. But as you notice, I'm also adding white in on top of those brown orangish spots. And that will be just fine since we're going to come back over there and tighten up that color just in a little while. So that'll work just fine. So it's a lot of little dagger strokes when we get close in by the face. And now I have moved on and added black. So I went straight up black here, and we're going to darken in some very, very key points. We don't want to blend out into that brown a whole lot with that black because it'll get kind of ugly. But one of the reasons I chose Payne's Gray to start this painting with is Payne's Gray has a blue cast to it. Blue is the opposite of orange. All your browns are orangish tones. So having that opposite, it creates a great deal of contrast, better than if you were using normal black. Some of your blacks, you know, have a little bit of a brownish shift to them. As you see, I'm using sepia right now. So we're using sepia and going to darken in around those edges. We're going to blend everything in. Notice I brought that sepia over the paws just a little bit. So some of those hairs are going to come over the top. So as we get closer and closer towards the end of the picture, I continue to start tightening up any of the tight details that need to be put in there, particularly closest to the center portion of the face around the eyes. We want to draw the viewer into those eyes, and that is going to be very, very helpful. So you can get away without putting a ton of detail in the outer edges, but wherever you want to draw the viewer's attention, you can do a couple of different tricks to draw them in. One is making it much more crisp in the center of focus that you want to create. And another way is by the placement within the picture, but that's a little bit long-winded for today's video. So as we continue to sharpen this up, then we're going to move in. We're going to head over to the paws in just a moment, so you'll see me get into the paws. And when I get to the paws, so we're just using a color that it came out of. It's actually one of the Createx illustration line colors. It came from the Bloodline colors, and it is called Deep Olive Gold. It is going to be the only color I use in there, so we're just going to add a little bit of texture. And of course, I control how much paint I put in there will control how dark things get. And it's really pretty easy stuff here. Just have to go in and tighten up things, get it tight where the paws meet up with the blanket that it's sitting on. And I've done some other videos on fabric, so I didn't get into that point just at the moment. Came back in, touching up a few things with white, and then we will go through, we're going to glaze some transparent in here, tighten up our colors, deepen in where it wasn't dark enough. And then once we blend all that in, we'll get to the final thing we're going to do is put the whiskers in there. Of course, I pulled the black ones out and then use a pen for the white. All right, guys, I appreciate those of you who made it all the way through the video. I am Bill Kennedy with the Airspace. Hopefully you got something out of it. And if you did, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I'll leave you a link for that paint marker that I was been talking about all through the video. I used my Iwata Eclipse and my GSI Creos PS270 for this entire painting, and I used Createx illustration colors on an unprepped 18 by 24 inch canvas. Anyway, guys, that's a wrap. We appreciate you for coming by. Y'all have a good one.